The dust hung in the air like a golden veil as Olivia Vance clutched the letter in her trembling hands, the words blurring before her eyes. Her brother was dead, leaving her the sole heir to the struggling Lazy V Ranch in Petaluma, California. At 22, with nothing but her Eastern education and determination, she had no choice but to head west and claim her inheritance, a decision that would change her life forever. It was the spring of 1876 when Olivia stepped off the stagecoach, her buttoned boots barely touching the ground before the reality of frontier life assaulted her senses. Petaluma was nothing like Boston rower Wilder, yet somehow more alive. Her brother's attorney, a stout man named Mr. Peterson, greeted her with a grim expression that told her everything she needed to know about the state of her inheritance before he even spoke a word. "Miss Vance, I regret to inform you that your brother's ranch is nearly bankrupt," Peterson said, escorting her to his office. "The drought last year devastated the herd, and without proper hands to manage what's left." He let the words hang in the air. Olivia squared her shoulders. "Then I shall have to hire proper hands, Mr. Peterson." The attorney's laugh was sharp and humorless. "With all due respect, Miss Vance, no seasoned cowboy is going to work for a woman, especially one from back east with no ranching experience." "They will if they want to be paid," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty roiling inside her. 3 days later, Olivia stood on the porch of the ranch house, surveying what was now hers. The Lazy V sprawled across the rolling hills, its fences broken in places, its barn in need of repair. The cattle that remained looked thin, scattered across the pastures like forgotten chess pieces. "It ain't much to look at anymore," came a gravelly voice behind her. Olivia turned to find an older man with weathered skin and kind eyes. "You must be George," she said, recognizing the name of the ranch foreman from her brother's letters. "Yes, madam, been with the Lazy V for 15 years. He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Miss Vance, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this ranch needs more than just a new owner. It needs workers, money, and someone who knows the land." "I have money, some savings from teaching back east," she replied, "and I can learn the land. As for workers." She glanced at the nearly empty bunkhouse. "Where do I find good cowboys, George?" The answer came in the form of a cattle drive passing through Petaluma the following week. Olivia, dressed in her most practical riding skirt and jacket, made her way to the saloon where the cowboys had gathered after delivering their herd. The room fell silent as she entered, all eyes turning to the slender woman who stood out like a rose in a briar patch. She approached the bar with purposeful steps, ignoring the whispers that followed her. "I am looking for men to work the Lazy V," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "Fair wages, room and board." A burst of laughter erupted from a corner table. "The Lazy V." "That place is on its last legs," called out a red-faced cowboy. "Besides, what does a lady like you know about running a ranch?" Olivia felt her cheeks flush but held her ground. "I know that a ranch needs hard workers, and I am willing to pay for them." The men exchanged glances, some dismissive, others curious. One by one they approached, asking questions about pay, conditions, and her plans for the ranch. By evening's end, Olivia had hired 3 men, none of whom seemed entirely convinced of her ability to save the Lazy V, but all desperate enough for work to take the chance. The next morning, as the new hires arrived at the ranch, a 4th man appeared. He was tall and lean, with shoulders broad enough to suggest strength despite his wiry frame. His clothes were worn but clean, his face partially hidden beneath the brim of his hat. "I heard you're hiring," he said simply, dismounting from a dappled gray horse that had seen better days. Olivia assessed him with a critical eye. Unlike the others, who were robust and weather-beaten, this man seemed almost too refined for ranch work. His hands, though calloused, were elegant, and there was an intelligent gleam in his blue eyes that hinted at education beyond the saddle. "I need men who can handle the hard work of rebuilding this ranch," she replied. "It's not an easy job." The man smiled slightly, the gesture transforming his solemn face. "My name is Wade Sullivan. I've worked cattle from Texas to Montana. I may not look like much, but I know ranching." George, who had been watching the exchange from the corral, ambled over. "Wade Sullivan," he repeated, eyeing the newcomer. "I've heard that name before. Weren't you the one who saved that herd during the blizzard of 73 up in Wyoming?" Wade shrugged, uncomfortable with the recognition. "That was more luck than skill." "It was both," George insisted, turning to Olivia. "Miss Vance, this man has a reputation for being one of the best trail bosses in the West." Olivia's interest was piqued, but she remained cautious. "If you're so accomplished, Mr. Sullivan, why come to a struggling ranch like the Lazy V? Sometimes a man wants to put down roots," he answered simply, "and I believe this land has potential." Before Olivia could respond, one of the newly hired cowboys, a burly man named Hank, joined them, sizing up Wade with obvious disdain. "This the new hand," Hank snorted. "He don't look strong enough to wrangle a lamb, let alone a steer. We need men with muscle, not some scrawny drifter." Wade didn't flinch, his gaze steady on Olivia rather than his critic. "Strength isn't just in the arms, madam. It's in knowing when to push and when to hold back, when to ride the storm and when to seek shelter." Hank spat on the ground. "Fancy words don't mend fences or round up cattle." "No," Olivia agreed, "but intelligence combined with experience might save this ranch." She extended her hand to Wade. "You're hired, Mr. Sullivan. You can start by helping George assess what needs to be done first." As the others dispersed, Hank lingered, his displeasure evident. "You're making a mistake," he warned. "That one's too frail for real ranch work." Wade's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, determination, perhaps, or a hint of steel beneath the quiet exterior. Dismissed as too frail for ranch work. He finally spoke, his voice low but firm as he turned to Olivia. "Then I'll be strong enough for both of us." In that moment, standing in the dusty yard of the Lazy V, Olivia felt the first stirring of something unexpected, a connection that went beyond employer and employee. A spark of recognition between two souls who understood what it meant to be underestimated. The work began at dawn the next day. Olivia, determined to prove herself capable of running the ranch, joined the men as they set about repairing fences, rounding up stray cattle, and assessing the condition of the land and structures. By mid-morning, her hands were blistered, her back ached, and her fashionable riding skirt was torn and dirty. Still, she persisted, refusing to retreat to the house where ladies were expected to remain. "You don't have to do this," Wade said, appearing beside her as she struggled to secure a loose board on the corral fence. "No one expects the owner to perform manual labor." Olivia wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a streak of dirt across her forehead. "I expect it of myself. How can I ask others to save my ranch if I'm not willing to work alongside them?" Wade took the hammer from her hands, their fingers brushing momentarily. "At least let me show you a better way to hold this," he said, demonstrating the proper technique. "It's not about strength, it's about leverage." As the days passed, a routine emerged. Wade, despite Hank's continued skepticism, proved to be invaluable. His knowledge of cattle, land management, and the rhythms of ranch life far exceeded what his appearance suggested. More importantly, he was patient with Olivia, teaching her the skills she needed without condescension. "Why are you helping me?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, nursing cups of coffee after a long day's work. The sunset painted the hills gold, casting long shadows across the yard. Wade considered the question, taking his time as he always did before speaking. "Because you remind me of someone," he finally said. "Someone who refused to give up even when the odds were stacked against them." "Who?" Olivia prompted when he fell silent. A shadow crossed his face. "My sister. She was determined, like you, believed she could change her circumstances through sheer force of will." "Where is she now?" Wade's gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "She died during a fever outbreak in 71. I was away on a cattle drive by the time I returned." He left the sentence unfinished. Olivia felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry, so am I," he set his cup down with deliberate care. "That's why I understand your determination to save this place. It's not just land and cattle, it's your brother's legacy." The conversation shifted something between them, creating a thread of understanding that went beyond their professional relationship. In the following weeks, Olivia found herself seeking Wade's company, valuing not just his expertise but his quiet strength and thoughtful insights. The ranch, meanwhile, showed small signs of improvement. The remaining cattle began to fatten on the spring grass, the repaired fences kept predators at bay, and the bunkhouse, now housing 4 cowboys and George, rang with occasional laughter in the evenings. But challenges remained. The water in the western pasture was dwindling, forcing them to drive the herd further east each day. And rumors circulated in town that Edwin Blackwater, a wealthy rancher whose property bordered the Lazy V, was interested in acquiring the land by fair means or foul. "Blackwater's men have been seen near our north boundary," George reported one morning as they gathered for breakfast. "I don't like it," Wade nodded grimly. "He's been buying up struggling ranches all across the county, figures Miss Vance will be an easy target." "Well, he's wrong," Olivia declared, pouring coffee for the men. "The Lazy V is not for sale." Hank, who had gradually developed a begrudging respect for Olivia if not for Wade, grunted. "Blackwater don't take no for an answer. Man's got money and connections." "And we have determination," Wade countered. "Plus, we've got something he doesn't." "What's that?" Olivia asked. Wade smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his usually serious face. "A secret weapon, you, Miss Vance. Blackwater expects you to fail. He doesn't understand that sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones with the biggest muscles." His words, spoken with such conviction, warmed Olivia more than she cared to admit. In the weeks since Wade had arrived, she had come to rely on his steady presence, his unwavering support. What she hadn't expected was how her admiration for him would evolve into something deeper, something that made her heart race when their hands accidentally touched or when she caught him watching her across the yard. Such feelings were impractical, she told herself. She was the ranch owner, he was her employee. Besides, a man like Wade Sullivan, capable, intelligent, and undeniably handsome despite his lean frame, surely had his pick of women far more suitable than a stubborn Easterner playing at being a rancher. The opportunity to test Blackwater's resolve came sooner than expected. The following Saturday, Olivia rode into town for supplies and to deposit the modest payment received for a small cattle sale. As she tied her horse outside the general store, Edwin Blackwater himself emerged, his imposing figure blocking her path. "Miss Vance," he greeted her, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. "A pleasure to finally meet the lady rancher everyone's talking about." Olivia straightened her spine, meeting his gaze directly. "Mr. Blackwater, I've heard much about you as well. All good, I hope." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you're facing some difficulties with the Lazy V. I'd be happy to relieve you of that burden for a fair price, of course." "The Lazy V is not a burden, Mr. Blackwater. It's my home and my livelihood," he laughed, the sound condescending. "My dear, ranching is no occupation for a woman, especially one as delicate as yourself. Why not sell to someone who can properly manage the land? You could return east with enough money to live comfortably." "I appreciate your concern," Olivia replied, her tone making it clear she did not, "but I have no intention of selling. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have errands to complete." As she attempted to step past him, Blackwater caught her arm. "I admire your spirit, Miss Vance, but be practical. Your cowboys are second-rate, your cattle are thin, and your water rights are vulnerable. It's only a matter of time before circumstances force you to accept my offer." Olivia pulled her arm free. "Perhaps you should direct your business propositions to my ranch foreman, Mr. Sullivan. He handles such matters for me." "Sullivan?" Blackwater's eyes narrowed. "Wade Sullivan works for you?" "He does," Olivia confirmed, intrigued by Blackwater's reaction. "Do you know him? We've crossed paths." Blackwater's tone had cooled considerably. "Be careful, Miss Vance. Sullivan isn't what he appears to be." Before she could question him further, Blackwater tipped his hat again and strode away, leaving Olivia with a sense of unease that followed her throughout her errands and the ride back to the ranch. She found Wade in the barn, meticulously repairing a saddle. The sight of his focused concentration, the careful way he worked the leather, momentarily distracted her from her concerns. There was a grace to his movements that belied his supposed frailty. "You met Blackwater," he said without looking up, somehow sensing her presence and the reason for her troubled expression. Olivia moved closer, watching his hands as they worked. "He seemed to know you, said you weren't what you appeared to be." Wade set the saddle aside and finally met her gaze. "And what do you think I appear to be, Miss Vance?" The question caught her off guard. What did she think of Wade Sullivan? He was competent, certainly, intelligent, undoubtedly. But there was more an integrity that radiated from him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with physical power and everything to do with character. "I think," she said slowly, "that you're a man who understands that true worth isn't measured by outward appearances. That you're someone who sees potential where others see only failure." She paused, gathering courage. "And I think there's more to your story than you've shared." Wade stood, closing the distance between them. For a moment, Olivia thought he might touch her, but he kept his hands at his sides. "Edwin Blackwater and I have history," he admitted. 5 years ago, I was trail boss for a herd he was driving to market. We encountered a Paiute village suffering from smallpox. I wanted to stop, offer what help we could. Blackwater refused, said they weren't worth delaying the drive. "What did you do?" Olivia asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "I stayed behind with medicines and supplies. By the time I caught up to the drive, Blackwater had told the others I'd abandoned my post. He fired me, made sure word spread that I was unreliable." Wade's expression remained impassive, but Olivia could sense the old anger beneath his calm exterior. "That's why he was surprised to find me here. My reputation made it hard to find decent work for a while. Yet you didn't correct me when I called you my foreman," Olivia observed. A ghost of a smile touched Wade's lips. "Sometimes it's useful to let people believe what they want to believe." The revelation should have troubled her. This man she'd come to trust had essentially misrepresented himself, but instead, Olivia found her respect for him deepening. He had risked his livelihood for strangers in need, endured the consequences with dignity, and now worked tirelessly for her ranch without complaint. "Blackwater wants the lazy V," she said, changing the subject. "He seems convinced I'll have no choice but to sell." Wade's expression hardened. "He's accustomed to getting what he wants, but he's underestimating you and us." The word "us" hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. The next morning brought a new crisis. Hank rode in at dawn, his horse lathered from hard riding. "The creek's been dammed," he announced, dismounting in a cloud of dust. "Eastern pastures cut off from water," George cursed under his breath. "Blackwater's work, I'd bet my last dollar on it." Olivia's heart sank. Without water access, half their grazing land was useless. "How bad is it?" "It's a solid barrier," Hank replied. "Would take days to clear by hand." Wade, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. "Show me." An hour later, Olivia, Wade, and the rest of the crew stood at the edge of what had once been a flowing creek. A wall of rocks, logs, and debris blocked the water, creating a pool that flooded Blackwater's land while leaving the lazy Vitikes eastern pasture dry. "This is no natural dam," George declared, inspecting the structure. "This was deliberately built." Wade knelt, examining the construction. "Recently, too, the mud's still wet underneath." Olivia felt a surge of fury. "This is sabotage. We should report it to the sheriff." "Sheriff Wilkins?" Hank scoffed. "He's in Blackwater's pocket, won't do nothing." Wade straightened, a determined look in his eyes. "We don't need the sheriff. What we need is black powder." By sunset, they had a plan. Wade, who had worked briefly in mining before turning to ranching, knew how to place small charges to break apart the dam without causing a dangerous flood. The challenge was obtaining the explosive without alerting Blackwater's men. "I can get it," Olivia volunteered. "No one will suspect me of buying black powder." Wade shook his head. "It's too risky. If Blackwater finds out, he won't," she interrupted. "Besides, as you're fond of reminding everyone, appearances can be deceiving. Who would suspect a delicate Eastern lady of plotting to blow up a dam?" Despite Wade's concerns, Olivia rode into town the following day, a list of innocent supplies in her reticule, along with a separate request for the shopkeeper's discretion regarding a special purchase. Mr. Davis, whose dislike of Edwin Blackwater was well known, was happy to provide the black powder and fuse, carefully wrapped and hidden among her other goods. As she left the store, however, Olivia felt eyes on her. Glancing across the street, she spotted one of Blackwater's men watching her with open suspicion. She nodded politely and continued to her horse, maintaining a calm exterior while her heart raced. The ride back to the Lazy V seemed interminable, every distant rider a potential threat, every sound behind her a possible pursuer. When she finally reached the ranch, Wade was waiting in the yard, his face tight with worry. "You were followed," he said without preamble. Olivia dismounted, handing him the package containing the black powder. "How do you know?" One of Blackwater's men rode past about 10 minutes ago, keeping to the ridge line. He was watching the road from town. George joined them, his weathered face grave. "If they suspect what we're planning, they'll post guards at the dam." Wade considered this, then turned to Olivia. "We'll have to move tonight, under cover of darkness." The plan was simple but risky. Wade and Hank would set the charges while George and the other hands created a diversion on the northern boundary of Blackwater's property. Olivia, despite her protests, was to remain at the ranch house. "I'm coming with you," she insisted as Wade prepared to leave, checking his saddle and the carefully packed explosives. "It's too dangerous," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "If something goes wrong, then I should be there." Olivia stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. "This is my ranch, Wade, my responsibility." He looked down at her hand, then at her face, his expression softening. "Olivia," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I couldn't bear it if you were hurt." The simple admission, spoken in a voice rough with emotion, stilled her argument. They stood together in the gathering dusk, connected by touch and the unspoken feelings that had grown between them. "Be careful," she finally whispered. "Come back safely." Wade covered her hand with his own. "I will." As the men rode out, Olivia paced the porch, watching the moon rise over the hills. The night was clear and still, the silence broken only by the occasional call of a night bird. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Just after midnight, she heard a distant boom, followed by what sounded like rushing water. The dam had been breached. Now all she could do was wait for the men to return, hoping they had escaped undetected. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent her running to the yard, a lantern held high. It was George and two of the hands, their faces triumphant despite their exhaustion. "It worked," George announced, dismounting stiffly. "The dam's gone and the creek's flowing again." "Wade and Hank?" Olivia asked, scanning the darkness behind them. George's smile faded. "They were right behind us. Should have been here by now." Another hour passed with no sign of the missing men. Olivia, unable to bear the waiting any longer, was saddling her horse when the sound of approaching riders drew her back to the yard. It was Hank supporting a slumped figure on the horse beside him. "Wade, he's shot," Hank called out as they approached. "Blackwater's men were waiting for us. We got the dam blown, but they opened fire as we were leaving." George and the others rushed forward, carefully lifting Wade from his saddle. He was conscious but pale, blood staining his left side. "Get him to my room," Olivia ordered, leading the way to the house. "And send for the doctor." They laid Wade on Olivia's bed, his blood quickly soaking into the pristine white sheets. With trembling hands, she cut away his shirt to reveal a bullet wound just below his ribs. "It went clean through," Hank observed. "That's good, at least." Olivia sent one of the men galloping for the doctor in town, then set about cleaning the wound as best she could. Wade remained conscious throughout, his eyes fixed on her face as she worked. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Shouldn't have let them see us." "Hush," she soothed, pressing a clean cloth against the wound to slow the bleeding. "Save your strength." His hand found hers, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injury. "You should know," he said, his voice faint but determined. "In case I don't you dare," Olivia interrupted, tears threatening to spill. "Don't you dare say goodbye, Wade Sullivan. You promised to come back safely." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "So I did." The doctor arrived just before dawn, his expression grim as he examined the wound. "The bullet missed anything vital," he confirmed after a thorough examination, "but he's lost a lot of blood and there's risk of infection." For 3 days, Wade hovered between life and death, fever burning through him as Olivia kept vigil at his bedside. She spoke to him constantly, sometimes reading from books found in her brother's study, sometimes simply talking about her hopes for the ranch, for the future for them. On the fourth morning, she awoke from an uncomfortable doze in the chair beside the bed to find Wade watching her, his eyes clear and alert for the first time since the shooting. "You're still here," he said, his voice weak but steady. Olivia moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking his hand in both of hers. "Where else would I be? You should be running your ranch, not nursing an invalid. The ranch is managing without me for a few days." She hesitated, then added softly, "I'm not sure I would manage without you." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Wade's fingers tightened around hers. "Before I was shot," he began, then paused, gathering strength. "I wanted to tell you something. I need you to know that a commotion outside interrupted him, the sound of horses, men shouting, a woman's frightened cry." Olivia rose, moving to the window in time to see Edwin Blackwater dismount in the yard, flanked by several armed men and the town sheriff. "Stay here," she instructed Wade, who was already attempting to rise despite his weakness. "I'll handle this." George met her at the door, his expression grave. "Blackwater's accusing us of trespassing and destruction of property. Sheriff's got a warrant for Wade's arrest." Olivia straightened her shoulders, smoothing down her rumpled dress. "Wade is in no condition to be moved, and if anyone has committed crimes, it's Blackwater, damming a creek that rightfully flows through both properties." She stepped onto the porch, facing the men gathered in her yard. "Mr. Blackwater, Sheriff Wilkins, to what do I owe this invasion of my property?" Blackwater's face was flushed with anger. "Where is Sullivan? He destroyed my dam, trespassed on my land. I want him arrested." Sheriff Wilkins, a thin man with nervous eyes, held up a piece of paper. "I have a warrant, Miss Vance. Best you cooperate. Mr. Sullivan is recovering from a gunshot wound inflicted by your men, Mr. Blackwater, while they were trespassing on my land." Olivia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "He cannot be moved without risking his life." "Surely even you wouldn't demand that, Sheriff." The sheriff hesitated, glancing between Olivia and Blackwater. "The law is the law, madam. If he's here, I need to take him in. And I need witnesses to the fact that Edwin Blackwater illegally dammed a creek, cutting off my water rights," Olivia countered. "Perhaps we should discuss that matter first." Blackwater's expression darkened. "You can't prove anything?" "Can't I?" Olivia held his gaze. "Several people in town saw me purchase supplies the day before the dam was breached. They can testify that I was nowhere near your property that night. Yet somehow the dam was destroyed, and Mr. Sullivan was shot by men identified as your employees." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Blackwater claims his men were defending his property against intruders. And I claim they were preventing the rightful flow of water that has sustained both ranches for decades," Olivia replied. "I wonder which claim a judge would find more compelling, especially when several neighboring ranchers have similar complaints about your aggressive tactics." A tense silence followed her words. Blackwater's face contorted with fury, but Olivia stood her ground, flanked now by George and the other hands who had gathered on the porch. "This isn't over," Blackwater finally spat. "Sullivan is a criminal and you're harboring him. No judge will side with a woman trying to run a ranch she knows nothing about." "Perhaps not," came a new voice from the doorway, "but they might listen to me." Wade stood there, pale and swaying slightly, one hand pressed to his bandaged side. Despite his weakness, there was an unmistakable authority in his bearing. "Judge Preston in Sacramento remembers how you left those Paiute families to die, Blackwater," Wade continued, his voice gaining strength. "He also remembers that you were charged with water rights violations twice before. I wrote to him the day after we discovered your dam. His reply should be arriving any day now." The sheriff looked alarmed. "Judge Preston, the federal judge," Wade nodded. "The same. He takes a dim view of men who abuse their power to steal from their neighbors." Blackwater's confidence visibly faltered. "You're bluffing. Preston wouldn't involve himself in a local dispute." "Would you care to wager your freedom on that assumption?" Wade asked mildly. "Because interfering with water rights across property lines is a federal offense, especially when those rights are documented in the original land grants." The confrontation ended in a stalemate, with Blackwater and the sheriff retreating after extracting a promise that Wade would present himself to the court once he was well enough to travel. As the dust from their departing horses settled, Wade's strength finally gave out. He sagged against the doorframe, and Olivia rushed to support him. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," she scolded, helping him back to bed. Wade's smile was weary but triumphant. "Sometimes you have to stand on your feet, even when you can barely stand." As she tucked the blankets around him, Olivia asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Was it true about writing to Judge Preston?" "Every word," Wade confirmed. "I've known Thomas Preston since my days working cattle in Sacramento Valley. He's a fair man who despises bullies like Blackwater. And the water rights documentation," Wade's eyes twinkled despite his exhaustion. "I found your brother's original deed in his desk while looking for paper to write to Preston. The water rights are explicitly stated. Blackwater has no legal claim to dam that creek." Olivia sat beside him, overcome with gratitude and something deeper, something that made her heart race and her breath catch. "You risked your life for this ranch. Why?" Wade reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet certain. "Not for the ranch," he said softly. "For you, Olivia, everything I've done since I arrived has been for you." The simple confession broke something open inside her, all the fear, worry, and carefully restrained feelings of the past weeks rushing out in a flood of emotion. Without thinking, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his, a kiss both tender and desperate. When she pulled back, Wade's eyes were wide with surprise and undisguised joy. "I've wanted to do that since the first week," he admitted, his voice husky. "Why didn't you?" she whispered. "You're the ranch owner, I'm just a hired hand." Olivia shook her head, smiling through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You've never been just anything, Wade Sullivan." In the days that followed, Wade recovered his strength while Olivia divided her time between caring for him and managing the ranch. The promised letter from Judge Preston arrived, confirming that the water rights belonged to the Lazy V and warning Blackwater against further interference. The sheriff, sensing which way the wind was blowing, dropped the charges against Wade. As spring gave way to summer, the Lazy V began to flourish. The cattle fattened on the lush grass, now properly watered by the unobstructed creek. The bunkhouse filled with reliable hands attracted by word that the ranch was making a comeback. And in the main house, a partnership deepened into something neither Olivia nor Wade had dared hope for. They were sitting on the porch one evening in late July, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. Wade had fully recovered, his lean frame still wiry but strong enough to handle the most demanding ranch work. More importantly, his presence had brought a balance to the Lazy V, his knowledge complementing Olivia's determination, his quiet strength supporting her bold vision. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About the future of the ranch." Wade glanced at her, his expression curious. "What about it?" "It needs stability, a clear direction." She turned to face him fully. "It needs both of us, Wade. Not as owner and employee, but as partners." He studied her face in the fading light. "What exactly are you proposing, Olivia Vance?" Her heart hammered in her chest, but her voice remained steady. "Marriage, equal partnership in the ranch and in life." For a long moment, Wade was silent, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, offering her his hand. When she took it, he pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "Are you certain?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "People will talk. They'll say you married beneath your station, that you could have done better than a man once dismissed as too frail for ranch work." Olivia placed her palm against his cheek. "Let them talk. I know the truth that you're the strongest man I've ever known. Not because of physical power, but because of your integrity, your intelligence, your unwavering support." Wade's arms tightened around her. "When I came here, I was looking for a place to belong, not expecting to find someone to belong with. You've given me both, Olivia." Their kiss sealed the promise between them, witnessed only by the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. The wedding took place in September, a simple ceremony in the Petaluma church followed by a celebration at the ranch. The townspeople came, curious to see the Eastern lady who had defied expectations by not only keeping her brother's ranch, but making it thrive. Even some of Blackwater's former allies attended, sensing that the balance of power in the county was shifting. Judge Preston himself traveled from Sacramento to officiate, his presence a public acknowledgement of Wade's standing and a not-so-subtle message to those who might consider interfering with the Lazy V in the future. As the newlyweds danced beneath lanterns strung across the yard, George approached with a proud smile. "Your brother would be pleased," he told Olivia. "The ranch is coming back stronger than ever." "Thanks to all of us," she replied, including the old foreman in her happiness. "We make quite a team." Later, as the celebration continued around them, Wade led Olivia away from the crowd, toward the creek that had been the catalyst for their confrontation with Blackwater. In the moonlight, the water sparkled as it flowed freely between the two properties. "I have something for you," Wade said, reaching into his pocket. "A wedding gift." He placed a small wooden box in her hands. Inside lay a delicately crafted silver brooch shaped like a V with a tiny ruby at its center. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, touching the polished silver. "But when did you have time?" "I commissioned it in town the day after you proposed," Wade admitted. "Had it made from a silver dollar my father gave me when I left home. It was the only valuable thing I owned." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's perfect." The Lazy V reborn. "Not just the ranch," Wade said, taking the brooch and carefully pinning it to her dress. "Us, the life we're building together." As they stood by the creek that night, arms entwined and hearts full, Olivia reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. She had arrived in Petaluma a year ago, alone and uncertain, determined to save her brother's legacy. She had found so much more: a home, a purpose, and a love that defied expectations. In the years that followed, the Lazy V prospered under their joint stewardship. Wade's knowledge of cattle breeding improved the herd, while Olivia's head for business ensured the ranch's financial stability. They faced challenges: drought seasons, market fluctuations, the lingering resentment of men like Blackwater who couldn't accept a woman as an equal in ranching circles, but they faced them together, each complementing the other's strengths. Their first child, a son they named William after Wade's father, was born in the spring of 1878, followed by twin daughters, Sarah and Emma, 2 years later. The children grew up learning both the practical skills of ranch life from their father and the value of education and determination from their mother. By 1885, the Lazy V had expanded to include neighboring land that Blackwater had been forced to sell after overextending his finances. Wade and Olivia turned the expanded property into one of the most successful cattle operations in Northern California, known for its fair treatment of workers and innovative management. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the same porch where they had shared their first kiss, Wade took Olivia's hand, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Taking on the ranch, facing all the obstacles, marrying a man others thought wasn't strong enough for this life," Olivia smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Never, not for a single moment." From the yard came the sounds of their children playing, their laughter mingling with the evening breeze. Inside the house, preparations for a celebration dinner were underway. The Lazy V hummed with life and prosperity, a testament to what could be accomplished when two people believed in each other's strength. "You know," Wade said, his voice warm with memory, "when I told you I'd be strong enough for both of us, I never imagined you'd be the one carrying me through half the time." "That's what partnership means," Olivia replied simply. "Sometimes you're the one who's strong, sometimes it's me. Together, we're unbreakable." As the sun set over the hills of Petaluma, casting long shadows across the land they had fought for and nurtured, Wade and Olivia Sullivan knew they had built something rare and precious: a love as vast as the western sky, as enduring as the land itself. Born from a moment when a man dismissed as too frail had found the courage to be strong in ways that truly mattered. In the decades that followed, Their story became part of local legend, how an Eastern lady and a supposedly frail cowboy had transformed a failing ranch into a thriving legacy. How they had stood against power and prejudice, how they had proven that true strength comes in many forms. But for Wade and Olivia, the greatest triumph was simpler. They had found in each other exactly what they needed, not just a partner in work, but a companion in life, someone who saw their true worth when others could not. And that, they both agreed, was worth every struggle along the way.